Welcome everyone to the Warwick Marxist meeting on Is Capitalism Killing Our Body and Our Mind? Woody is going to talk for about 20 minutes and then open discussion. Feel free, everyone, to contribute, give your ideas out there, that type of thing, ask questions. And we'll just have an open discussion and hopefully come to some great conclusions. Take it away, Woody.
Okay, so is capitalism killing our body and mind? Like a very nuanced title. That wasn't my choice, but so I hope we all know that capitalism is like unsustainable as an economic system. So these like massive waste, poverty, and the destruction of commons, so like the environment, like society generally. But a lot less focus has been put on like the psychological impact of it on people's like psychological well-being. So just some data to start off with. Mixed anxiety and depression accounts for 1/5 of missed work days in the UK. The risk of mental illness in the poorest fifth of the UK population is 2.5 times that of the richest fifth. The highest rate of depression in the world nationally is India at 36%. So it's a site of like extreme poverty, inequality, and a history of colonial exploitation. But if we look at mental health phenomenologically, like from the perspective of the sufferer, like it becomes a lot less clear-cut, so it's hard to draw boundaries because sort of the symptoms are continuous with everyday life, and only when they like coalesce in a certain way do they become like a mental disorder. So it's a lot less like clear-cut when you look at it from that angle. So is mental illness a social problem? Like psychology tends like traditionally to promote the idea of like an isolated mind, so like an internally like inclusive system that all problems arise from like internal factors such as genetics, chemical imbalances and stuff like that. But this ignores like the material conditions in which persons are situated and the social like relations that condition these material circumstances. So on the Marxist analysis, we're living in a capitalist system, and this is like fundamental to the material conditions in which people live and in which shape their mental states. So it also like sees subjects as potential aberrations from the social norms, and it seeks to always sort of return to a normal state, so like a model ideal. But this sort of like ignores how the societal norms themselves could create trends in mental illness. So like there could be a nationwide depression as a result of a certain social system, but when the focus is placed on the norm as an ideal, then this sort of gets like overlooked. And sort of like therapeutic psychology is always aimed towards reintegrating individuals into their society. And if this is an oppressively structured society, it's questionable whether this is always like desirable, whether by reintegrating or like aiming to reintegrate citizens into their social structure as it exists, you're sort of acting as an instrument of control for the ruling class. So all this is sort of overlooked by traditional psychology, but recently in sort of like the late 20th century, there emerged this movement of critical psychology, which sort to challenge these sort of bourgeois assumptions that are like built into the psychological thought that had gone before, such as like the irrelevance of material conditions and stuff like that. Why would we need a critical psychology? And basically, like, it's to investigate like how social class and social relations factor into mental health and like psychological well-being, and to use these findings to actually implement political demands where that's necessary, where altering society is actually necessary for improving mental health. So, how does capitalism contribute to mental illness? First off, does it? That is a valid question. A lot of people take the genetic approach to mental health, so disorders can be reduced to sort of a biological imperfection or like a sort of malfunction. But most of the research shows that there are genetic predispositions, but like generally it's your circumstances that determine whether or not you'll develop a mental illness. So I'll go through like the most prevalent mental illnesses, and like sort of talk about potential factors that arise from capitalism that don't necessarily cause it, they don't necessarily determine it in all cases, but contribute like in their coexistence. So the first one is like due to the early work of Marx, the idea of alienation. So workers become like alienated from the product of their labour because they are no longer working based on their natural needs and capacities, but rather based on a need to gain wages from the capitalist who employs them. So they no longer have control over the labour process, and this creates a sense of like powerlessness, a sense of loss of control, and this has been like shown to be quite important in psychological well-being in like many studies, even determining like life expectancy in some cases. Yeah, sort of like the systemization of labour sort of creates a sense that work is like replaceable even by technology. Like a recent example is the concerns over lecture capture, like making the repeated lecture process redundant, so the lecturers basically get laid off after the first time. So yeah, workers are basically considered sort of valuable as like providers of labour time. So they're interchangeable with other labourers, and they don't really have any value in this system of exchange as human beings. It's only their labour that is valuable. There's also the like phenomenon of atomization. So like workers becoming like fragmented from each other by the division of labour, increased mobility, like distancing people from their communities, and yeah, like sort of a general ideology of individualism, where the person works to create the most profit for themselves and consumes individually. And this all sort of dissolves the like community support systems that would help with like the mental health conditions that arise like from these kind of social conditions. There's also the idea of the commodification of relationships. So capitalism always seeks to like transform meaningful connections into quantity relations so they can make a profit from them, and this can have like massively detrimental effects for people's general everyday experiences of life. And there's the idea of the internalization of oppression. So like if workers can't change their conditions of oppression, they sort of internalize them. So they see like this is like reinforced by sort of a bourgeois ideology, is that sort of a lack of success is a like personal failure rather than a result of class relations and the unequal structure of society. David Smale, who's like a psychotherapist, called this magical voluntarism, and he said that like a lot of what causes depression in people is the idea that they could change their circumstances if they had the willpower, but they personally fail to have that willpower, so their disadvantage in life is their own fault. Yeah, and second most prevalent condition is anxiety, so it's widely talked about, and like it's sort of one of those blurry-edged conditions. So like job insecurity is a massive part of this. So workers continually threatened with replacement because like a replaceable workforce is easy to exploit because they're continually trying to appease their employers. And just the competition required to attain a job in the first place. So like being unemployed is a form of work in itself and also unpaid. So like all this competition to attain like part-time work and stuff is degrades a worker for no benefit to them. And like the sort of system of zero-hour contracts and casualisation totally disregards the needs of the worker. It only sees them as providers of like a certain amount of labour time. And this creates like a continual struggle for subsistence, which creates massive anxiety, a massive problem, especially for migrant workers. And yeah, the general like pressure to increase efficiency is a massive problem. So the work is never productive enough. This is like seen in systems such as like meta work, so the idea of like logging how much work you've done as part of your work. And this creates a sort of like system of self-surveillance where workers are always checking how much they're producing for the employer. And also there's the like problem of like the question of productivity enhancing drugs. So will we reach a condition where the only way to succeed in work is to take a certain drug like Adderall or something, which increases your like capacity to function, to focus, and work more efficiently. And generally, there's like a lack of control over time. So the workers' time, like they have a lack of control over it. So when capitalists like seek to drive down wages, they're diminishing the value of the workers' time. So in effect, forcing them to sell more of their time. This creates a sense of like your life being sort of eroded away, which is a massive source of anxiety for lots of people. Schizophrenia is the third most prevalent disorder. There's more research to show that it's genetic in origin, but it has been shown to be more prevalent in densely populated urban areas. And there have been links shown to deprivation, feeling of like inequality to others. So those are all sort of like tangential relations to the capitalist system. The system also creates sort of secondary factors that lead to like mental health. So consumerism benefits capitalism, so it's not discouraged, but it can create like a negative cycle of like trying to fix your problems through buying but never really succeeding. Like self-destructive escapism habits like alcoholism, drug use, gambling, which all create like a vicious cycle in a similar way, less contained but still like very prevalent. Also, yeah, like we were talking about this at the reading group a couple of weeks ago. The translation of sort of a sense of powerlessness into violence, like in communities and the family, can create obviously severe distress and anxiety, and yeah, that creates a lot of mental health problems. And there's also like the physiological factors, which is capitalism destroying our body. Very shocking fact that the life expectancy difference between the rich and poor in London is 25 years. So like exhaustion and chronic stress from overworking, malnutrition and sleep deprivation and related problems from poverty, and sort of a lack of exercise from cognitive-based labour, all like factor into this physical degradation of the worker. And this has been shown like throughout history. That employers really do not care about the physical well-being of their workers. And there's also the issue that capitalism has no imperative to care for the disabled. So having a like genetically predisposed or circumstantial disability really puts you at disadvantage in capitalism, because the worker is always replaceable. There's no need to create a support system for the disabled. This is especially shown under austerity politics. So how does capitalism fail to deal with these issues? So obviously the massive cuts to the mental health support services under austerity politics like reduces accessibility and availability of the support services necessary to ensure people get the right to get the support they need for their conditions. And this is obviously an outcome of the crisis of capitalism, so they don't have enough resources to actually like create a sustainable system which cares for everyone. And essentially mental health is a common good. It's not, you can't appropriate it for profit. So there's the issue that it's not actually profitable to promote it, which is like fundamental to why it doesn't get promoted in capitalism. And like capitalism can't fulfill the basic needs of workers. Essentially, it always drives down their living conditions. So, like the housing crisis is a massive example. It's quite hard to keep a level perspective on life when you don't have a house. Stuff like that. And essentially, it can't. The system can't provide the liberation necessary to ensure that workers can live fulfilling lives and overcome these degrading factors that can lead to mental illness and the symptoms that like form mental disorders. And also like there's the need to overcome this bourgeois psychology, so psychology that sees people as like individual units that have like internal problems that can be fixed and they can be reintegrated into capitalism. So yeah, essentially we need a socialist program to solve mental health issues. The two concerns like merge together, they're inseparable. But where is this program? So a lot of theorists have proposed like a sort of political manifestation of mental illness, so like a sort of political depression. Mark Fisher calls this capitalist realism. So it's like a sort of political analog to depression, where people see their social system as inescapable and basically just give up. Yeah, this is all like exacerbated by the conditions that people face, like the internalization of their oppression prevents them from seeking political solutions, and the atomization like prevents like collectivist political movements from forming, and sort of the time-centered anxiety under these working conditions prevent like people really committing to political movements because they feel like they don't have the time. Stuart Hall proposed the idea of sort of left melancholia, so like a mourning for a lost movement, which prevents us from engaging with current political issues. So you talk to a lot of leftists, they'll sort of say, well, you know, it was good once, but now it's just like there's no hope. And yeah, he proposes like creating a unified socialist movement for overcoming these barriers to progress is essential. Like we need to really address these issues. So yeah, what should the aims of this movement be? What should our aims be? So firstly, to politicise discourse about mental health is not just an individual issue, it's a social issue with social solutions. To create a platform for the mentally ill to voice their political demands, so to voice their concerns about austerity politics and the general like degradation of working conditions, especially for the mentally ill under capitalism. And to challenge this austerity politics which cuts mental health services, and to fight for improved working conditions, to ensure a better standard of living for everyone, and like a basic assurance of well-being for workers, including the eradication of poverty. And we should always seek to renew the collectivistic politics that we stand for in principle, but often fail to actually form in reality. So all this should be really geared towards a socialist political program to ensure that workers are liberated from their oppressive social conditions, their poor living conditions and poverty, to renew like supportive communities, meaningful social connections, and encourage participation in mental health promoting activities such as, you know, art, like recreation, just generally enjoying life, like outside the workplace, and yeah, to build an effective system of mental health care centered around people's needs rather than profit. Yeah, for all these reasons, we should consider our concern over mental health as like integrated with our political stance as socialists, and yeah, really. Consider them both as one and the same issue that we need to solve. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Woody. Okay.